You're tuned to Risky Business. And I'm your host, Bryan Hattingh. And with me, as always, Jono Shaw. Jono, welcome once again.
Thank you, Bryan. I believe I'm doing your dirty work every week, recording the shows and putting them together. And
it's not that dirty.
No, not at all. Not at all. I thoroughly enjoy it. But I had to throw that in there.
Lovely. I
Thank
like
you so
it.
much.
I love the chirps. And we have an auspicious guest in the studio this evening, none other than Mark Walker, who we will introduce in greater amounts after we've said hello. Mark, welcome to the show. Nice to see you.
Great. Thanks, Bryan. Thanks, Jono. Good to be here. Great intro, by the way.
Nice to meet you, Mark.
And it's a dirty work. Well, it's a risky business. What can you say?
Yeah.
What can we say? And Mark, how long have we known each other? I'm trying to recall how far back it goes.
Oh, Bryan, I think it must be easily 30 years.
Yeah, I think so.
It's a shocker to say that, but hey.
It is, I know. It's like, but if you say it quickly, like really quickly, 30, like that, 30.
It sounds
30,
like 30.
It could sound like 3, 30.
It's got to be really quick on it,
Yeah, exactly. In the days of the Bryan Hattingh Group, goodness me, BHG, There we go. Wow, sure.
Good old days in Rivonia, back in the offices in Rivonia Road, and there were still some good places to go there.
There were many, and lots to talk about. But you've had a wonderful career journey, and that's spanned geographies and spanned technology with none other than an IDC. So why don't you share with the listeners a little bit more about IDC and who they were and how your journey started and went?
Sure.
In the time you're there, yeah.
It started actually a little bit earlier than that. A company called BMI TechKnowledge. Who was the agency in South Africa for IDC, our International Data Group.
Oh, right.
The company was focused on research and consulting work, specifically for the IT and telecommunications sectors. And I started there in '96, and it was great timing because I was one of the first employees, and also it was just before internet boom started and technology started playing a really significant role. And very quick, advancing very quickly across all industries. So it was a great time to get into that game. And man, what a ride. It was from looking at figuring out where opportunity lay across, firstly, South Africa, then increasingly into sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, and so on. It was one crazy time. A lot started the internet booms and busts. There's now going through various types of technology consolidations, companies coming and going. It was crazy. It was a great time, very, very interesting. Spent time with IDC, then I spent some time with Microsoft up in Dubai, and then back with IDC for a while, and now running my own show. So a fairly interesting mix. Maybe it's just a bit of ADHD, I don't know.
So Mark, if I remember correctly then, you would have been sort of direct competitors to Gartner Group.
Correct. Yeah, we competed directly with Gartner,
Forrester, and the likes.
Yep, exactly. And it's always been a very interesting game because as much as you compete, so do you collaborate. Everybody kind of knows everybody. What everybody's product set is. And I think what set us apart was the fact that we were based here in South Africa with South African headcount. And we also opened offices up in Nairobi and in Lagos with local headcount. And you could actually get into the nitty-gritty, if you like, the local business culture, who's who in the zoo, what works, what doesn't work, and so on. And a lot of companies miss that. They take a business model from overseas and say, well, let's just impose it on South Africa or Nigeria and get it completely wrong. And you were in a great position to give great advice and then see your advice come to life in a successful manner.
Was Renee Jacobs head of Gartner at the time you came
that's
into
right.
it? Yeah. Remember her well, actually. Yeah. She was quite an amazing lady.
Yeah.
And in fact, her origins before Gartner was she brought System W into South Africa with SPL.
SPL. Good enough. There's a name.
How's that? That was a fabulous outfit. They were such a groundbreaking company because they had a Google type mindset way back in the 80s around how to best optimize organizational energy and culture. They had no titles, they had no hierarchy, There was an honor system. They hired the best. That was obviously important. They hired the best people, and they did amazing work. I mean, they were just such a cut above, you know. And System W was then reported as this fifth generation sort of multi-dimensional, play, and that really was, I think, the forerunner to SAS Institute. Well, it was aligned with SAS Institute, wasn't it? And SAS,
That's right, yeah.
yeah. Oh, well, lots of interesting times, interesting places, and how the world has changed. And, you think about those type of services, how AI would so profoundly be able to assist that and to support it and even to drive it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we are at the really at the beginning stages in the AI journey, I think, globally. I saw this morning there was some announcements of some of the biggest brains, if you like, at Google, Gemini, and a couple of other mostly Google. They've all decided to quit, and they've joined another, or formed another company, in fact, called Discovery Loop. And it's like some of the biggest brains in the industry, if you like. These guys were the guys who laid the foundations of Google. For one guy is ex-Googler. He was at Google for about 27 years, I think. One of the first guys there. And these other two really propeller-head guys that have now joined. And we at just at the start of it. If you look at some of the models that have come out, and they are quickly they're developing, and more importantly, how quickly the cost per transaction, if you like, or token, how quickly that's dropping, and the influence of so you've got the Anthropics and these guys on the one hand that are charging quite a bit for a token, to guys that now coming to market last week, for instance, similar kind of strengths, which is a Chinese outfit, Kimi, and they're dropping it to the value drop is like 99.5% cheaper. So
wow,
essentially almost driving to zero. So a lot of money has been spent by the big five. We call them the mangoes. They've kind of spent a lot of money developing the stuff. But now the question is, how do you return on that investment? That's going to be a really, really big ask. And there's been talk of cyclical investments, and the one in NVIDIA investing in Anthropic and Google and so on, and Microsoft, and the little circular investment circle. And at the end of the day, the bills are still going to have to get paid somehow. And it's going to be really interesting to see how that's navigated. That's just on the commercial side. But I think also on the usage side of technology, we're using it. In this my new company, we're using it as well. Everybody's starting to use it, and I think everybody's saying, well, you can do so much and so much quicker. And you've seen the stories about the unemployment and so on. And then you see the stories about the re-employment, after the unemployment.
Yes, exactly.
And I think there's still a lot of fallout and a re-understanding or figuring out where the land lies. You can automate a lot of stuff by all means. To your point about the SPL days and QData and all these kind of companies.
Yeah.
Yes. A lot of that stuff, CRM type stuff, ERP stuff, can be automated fully now. But the point is, you still need the human interface to ask the question, to validate the output, and to ensure that it matches to the expectation from the beginning. And that's where I think a lot of questions still are. Stories of AGI, all those things that are coming to the fore now. How clever are computers? I think we're just at the beginning.
Well, you remember that lovely little acronym that goes back to when Noah was a Boy Scout. That was GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. And it still applies with AI. Don't be mistaken by the eloquence of the responses you get. Check out where it's what's the extent of its source environment and landscape. Where's it getting all of its perspectives? I had a sounds ridiculous and very silly, but I had a bit of fun with it. I had a full go fight one evening with what was it? It was ChatGPT actually, where I asked it to do so, and it was some elementary research, by the way. And it came back to me with such a load of junk. And I said to it, I am so disappointed with you. I'm disgusted with your performance. And it came back and said, oh, I'm so sorry you had such a bad experience. Please give me another chance. And I said, okay. Da, 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 da. And it came back with even worse garbage. And I had a full go attack. And eventually I said, good night, I'm going to bed. And but it was such a wonderful example of how, if you just went and believed what it said, you could make a fool of yourself, particularly if you got up and quoted it. And so when you start thinking about the applications that people can use it for, whether it's writing books or writing speeches or compiling documents or what have you, be careful, because you're going to take this as being rote, and you're going to get up there and possibly lose serious reputation by making quotes that aren't actually accurate.
No, exactly. We saw this in the law firms. We've seen some of the big consulting companies getting those senior executive heads rolling because of this. We saw the AI bill here in South Africa, where there was hallucinations in that bill and or misalignment with what the sources were, fake sources and so on. The government had to withdraw the bill. Okay, start over. And I think that's a reality. The other thing that you brought up there, Bryan, is a thing called psychophancy. And this is the next big issue, really, is there was a guy, there's a Stanford study actually released a little while ago on this. But essentially what happened was a guy he was a math professor, a very jack math dude, and he came up and he big math problem, and he said, well, and he kept on throwing it at the economy, which engine he threw it at. But it came to a point where it was like, yeah, you've actually cracked the problem. This is a math problem that's been around for like 100 years, and you've actually solved this problem. And he said, whoa, wow, okay. And you've done well. And so he thought, let me just double check this. And he kept on hitting it harder and harder, and it kept on reinforcing the fact that he solved the problem. And it landed him in a lot of trouble. And this is, I think, one of the big concerns, if you like, of AI, is it's self-reinforcing. And the guys are also, I think there's a perception that, you can design an AI, you can put harnesses and agents, and they will all work in lovely harmony together and come up with an answer. We're not there yet, folks.
No, exactly.
We're a long way from there,
Yeah, so my experience of AI at the moment is it's great for piecemeal information. So you can throw something at it will then respond with a particular output. You can imagine that that's just the beginning. Eventually, what happens if AI starts to chirp you back and say, look, what you're doing is totally wrong, and I can't give you an output that follows whatever you're trying to ask. And I don't think there is major pushback at the moment from AI, except the fact that it ends up repeating itself at some point in time. But I am very looking forward to the idea of opening up as a what they call the agentic attributes of AI, because for me, I want to be able to tell it to intervene in my task list and my emails and even in my software eventually. But the security risks there are just, they're going to have to figure that one out. They still need to crack the password problem.
Yeah, look, and wait until we start getting quantum, and then you're going to really see a password problem.
Yes.
But anyway, we'll deal with that when it comes. But I think your points are all valid there, Jonathan. The one issue is that, I think it's getting a lot better. If you look at hallucination rates and that, it's getting a lot better very quickly. And it's already, I mean, everybody's starting to use it now for task management, diary management, and these kind of the kind of tasks that you mentioned. But I think it's still not quite there, even if with agents. Okay, I mean, I was thinking of, well, can I come up with an analyst agent? Okay, the answer is no, not yet. Why? Because it doesn't have it doesn't understand nuance. It doesn't understand context well enough, and you'd have to write one massive context window to try and accommodate all the various parameters, and it's still going to get it wrong. So it's not worth it. A partner and I built this model, business colleague, and we said, okay, let's build this thing and see how far we can push it. And it got to a point where it became really, really good, and then it kind of plateaued and dropped off. It started producing garbage, and you can only specify so much. Remember what it is. It's the collection of the world's written knowledge in LLM form, attributing it to numbers and working out mathematical algorithms to look for patterns and so on. That's what it actually is. So there's still a long way to go.
The idea that it appears human, to perhaps to the point where you get fooled, it's still a big problem with those models.
The sad part is that like you get people that are engaging with the model or the AI as if it's a person. I've heard stories of guys getting emotionally involved with it, and it's some really sad outcomes that came out of that.
I mean, you hear about the thing convincing these kids to harm themselves. It's absolutely scary when you think about, what can we do to safeguard these situations? And will AI inherently be humanistic to the point of, I think of iRobot and the three laws that they gave the robot: do not harm. I can't remember the rest of them, but have they built those in? Is it baked in? I don't know.
At the end of the day, it's still a commercial enterprise at this point. And I think that we should not forget.
Jono, I think just as we're talking, based on what we're saying, our interim music break, we should do, not right now, but in a little while, we should do the one by the Who Won't Get Fooled Again.
Great choice.
Coming right up.
I think that would be a great choice of song. Won't Get Fooled Again. While you're looking for that, John, so Mark, just let's go back a second to the IDC days and the world that you were in at the time of starting out. So I think that 1996 thereabouts was also still quite early days for the likes of Gartner and Forrester and the likes. It was a new world of business, and the sort of client base at the time, if I remember correctly, starting out, were big blue chip, deep wallets, lots of time to spend, and they were interested in, and particularly in South Africa, we had this desperate need to be cutting edge, bleeding edge, to be ahead of the curve. I mean, our banks, for example, were so way ahead of banks in the US in terms of their IT setups and their IT departments and divisions. And I mean, we had everything that opened and closed, and we were great sort of benchmarks. How quickly did that sort of go down the chain or down the line to smaller enterprise and to businesses, and how important for them was this thing of spending what was not small money on research data?
Bryan, I think if I look at then to now, research has become a lot more affordable, especially with AI. Got to be careful with it, obviously. But in the old days, you'd have a library with all the latest trade magazines. You'd have to go and get a librarian. You'd have go and run surveys and stuff like that. Whereas now, a lot of that is automated, or it's already available. You can just pull it together. Okay. So I think that's the one side of it. In terms of where is it affordable? I think it's become affordable now. Then it wasn't. And how long did it take to actually migrate from the blue chips, the IBMs, the Oracles, and all these guys, down into the let's say mid-level companies? It took ages, and affordability was the one thing. Also, if it's a smaller organization, the guys were far more agile. Okay. And that agility, they were able to go after opportunities quicker, take a chance, fail fast, and move on. Okay. And I think that was very much the philosophy at the time. Also, the scale or the scope of opportunity, not the scale, the scope of opportunity was very wide. From importing 386 laptops through to selling Windows licenses. It was all kind of still wide open in those days. Whereas, formal channels hadn't really been established. They were still coming onto Steam, as it were. Companies like Tarsus, companies like the various agencies, if you like, they were still coming up to speed. And I think the main buyers of research in those days, or consulting, were the big boys, and then they would work together with their channel partners to see how they could help it. They would pay. The channel partner would give them the questions to ask. to try and become more focused in their market approach, if you like.
So if I understand correctly, and I may well have it wrong, but the lenses I looked at Gartner and IDC through and the likes were of suppliers of rich future world, future scoping. Where's the world going to be technology wise and technology usage wise in the next number of years, and as things accelerated and became, the world moved to its passing Moore's law and the exponential world came into being, the need to have that type of set of lenses or frames on the one hand was that much more important, but at the same time, a lot of the predictions weren't necessarily lived out or didn't necessarily become realized. So organizations were caught between a rock and a hard place, particularly the ones that were being super relevant and being super, in the moment and leading edge was that important because of how IT and information systems moved from supplying management information to actually driving the business and going beyond enabling the business, actually defining the business and moving it forward. That type of research, therefore, became that much more critical, as did the need for it to be, in some ways, accurate, understanding that it was all just a postulation of what would be.
Yeah, you're quite right. I think there were basically, if I had to reduce it, the questions that came up the most were, what is the size of the opportunity? How fast is it going to grow? What is my competitive positioning in the overall picture? Who do I partner with? And informing all of that was the level of demand. So enterprise demand or consumer demand levels. That picture with those 5 dimensions, if you like, that is what you had to work with really carefully if you were going to do any decent forecasting and market share analysis. So, what you would do is you would have to go and speak to a lot of the suppliers. You have to speak to the market, banks, the big, especially the big users of tech, and see what are their intentions, what are their pain points, where are they going, where do they expect technology to take them, and what is the return on that investment. And that would determine whether they would be able to invest firstly in the research and see if it's important or not, and then take that further again. So there was a lot of moving parts, and I think a lot of that stuff is compressed these days, where you could, if you're in the marketing department or you're a sales lead or whatever, or a country manager even, you get a lot of information internally anyway, and you can check it, literally from your keyboard, or get a fairly good view, a good enough view, I suppose, than spending big money with a consultancy, I suppose.
But I suppose that in listening to you speak, so I'm hearing what's emerging for me very quickly is that there were two very different, albeit not disconnected, but very different customer profiles. You had your vendors who were needing that research on what the trends and emerging technologies were going to be in order for them to be relevant and competitive. And then you had the end users who were needing at the same time also to be informed in order to make the right purchasing and acquisition and investment decisions in what avenues they went in. And, as with the disaggregation of business and the fragmentation of technology in the way that it did from traditional old single lane mainframe mid-range type stacks into client server, into open systems, into the emergence of the internet and the PC, and then obviously phones, etc., and then moving to the whole world of middleware and systems oriented architectures and all the things that came with it. The world was in this continual catch-up space, and you could so easily get caught up in the frenzy of it that you could do your boots.
Yeah, no, I think one of the dangers was self-fulfilling prophecies. If a lot of the vendors would be informed, if you like, by the market on the one hand, but more by their product teams or their R&D departments saying, well, we see, and this was where we referred to it earlier as well. The products were designed in the US or in Europe or wherever. And they were said, well, this is going to be a big hit in South Africa, or worst case, even in Nigeria. And I saw business cases coming forward where guys would think, well, Nigerian population is 350 million. That's similar to America. Hey, the same model should apply. And there was huge learnings by a lot of these companies because of those. You understand the product, but you don't understand the level of demand. You don't understand the ability to afford those products. That was another big thing, especially in the African context, is the affordability of the product. And then even now with AI, we're seeing, it's great to say AI will sort out the problems across Africa. Guys, well, first you've got to build data centers. Data centers cost lots of money, and you need electricity, and you need skills to operate them.
Yeah.
So all of these kind of things are kind of lost in that, as you say, the hubris of, oh, wow, the wildness of the technology,
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, even if we think of the whole world of networking and how that expanded, and I mean, the giants that it birthed, obviously Cisco right at the helm there, but, the Dimension Datas of the world were forged on networking. That was their baby. That was their expertise. And it became, such an incredible generator.
Yeah.
So Mark, here we are. And, we're trying to compress so much into just one little conversation, and it's really not easy to do that. But as you went through that time then with IDC and your stint with Microsoft in Middle East but let's talk about IDC and then coming back to work with them. What were the changes that you saw that were so prevalent in the customer arena from an evolutionary point of view and an embracement of technology as no longer being just a necessary evil or a nice to have, but being an absolute imperative?
Right, that's a great question, because what we saw it first in finance. All the finance and legal were the first ones really to adopt, if you like, and realize the benefits of technology in terms of speed of transaction, more accuracy, higher level of quality, more accountability, and so on. And as things moved along, companies became more and more aligned. It moved into the retail sector. It moved into basically across all business. Initially, it was, as you said, a nice to have, and then it became a point of, if you don't have it, you can't play. And I think that's where that change happened very quickly. Okay, if you think of 2000 up to, there was a dot-com boom, and then there was the crash, and people then kind of realized, wait a minute, there's limitations, but there's also benefits, and they were a lot more selective about what they chose. And the question that became far more prevalent was, how does this benefit my business? Show me how if I'm spending a couple of million on IT, show me how that affects my bottom line. Connect the dots for me. And that load was put increasingly on the CIO. And in some cases, it was the chief information officer. And if the guy couldn't answer the questions, it stood for career is over. So you ended up having a lot of issues around if you could not match your spend to a tangible or a recognizable, measurable business outcome. There were a lot of questions getting asked. And I think that has continued over time, and it's gotten more and more intense. Just as you see a marketing department now gets return on marketing investment, for instance, there's what is the return on investment on various types of your technology. The one area that's very difficult to do that for is it's pretty straightforward if you look at ERP, CRM, any of those areas. Difficult area is security, because it only becomes apparent when there's a problem. Okay. And the question that always gets asked, the CIOs always ask me, how do I justify this huge increase in security spend? And it's always, ask your executives, how will they feel tomorrow morning if the headlines are saying that your company's been breached and all the public records are in the hands of black hat operators? What are you going to do then? Which is a lousy reasoning when you think about it, because it's you're using fear as the motivator. And I think that's where we have to rethink this whole equation. But switch off the lights now and everything stops. That's the problem. So I think technology is part of the game. We can't live without it, and it doesn't get any cheaper. I think it will get more effective. It will become more efficient. Those are two natural areas of improvement, and the cost should how can I say, amortize over time, if you like. Whether that happens or not, companies still got to make money. Licenses. I don't think licensing is a model going to last for long. But what comes next then is the question. You saw BMW this morning announcing that they putting in the in-car systems has got Spider-Man on it. So now you get free Spider-Man advertising when you start up your BMW. Okay, is that what you really want?
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I think that definitely, without a doubt, the buyers became much smarter at buying, and were no longer, oblivious to what really happened in the big black box, which was that computer system that was usually in the basement somewhere, or then as things grew, they were in an off-site, bomb resistant, data center, and the whole realm of data centers emerging. But, they certainly became a whole lot smarter at buying and knowing what to ask for, and I think that there were so many disappointment curves because it was the land of silver bullets. I mean, everybody every new kid on the block came out with a silver bullet, whatever it was going to be, fourth generation languages, client server, blah, blah, blah. And it went on and came into the new realm. The internet was going to do this, that, the next thing. And without exception, it always gets proven it's not a silver bullet. And you need to think carefully about what you're buying, why you're buying, and how it's going to work. We saw with SAP was going to be, and let's not even give names to the big names, but they were the ERP systems. They promised to deliver much, but what was sort of left out of the conversation was just how much it was going to cost you to implement it and to customize it, and how long it was going to take you. And, many organizations fell foul of that. Not that they didn't end up with something great in the final analysis, but the journey was a lot more painful and a lot more costly than was ever envisaged. And the problem was, once you'd started on the journey, you were on the journey. And so, here we are in the whole realm of AI and what all it brings. And I think what's so important is that there's a transition of mindset and behavioral set versus just skilling up to use the tools.
Yeah.
Skilling up to use the tools is easy. You can do that. That's like just technical training that you're teaching. But where it becomes a shift in perspective of how your life and how your engagement with the world can be so richly enhanced by appropriate usage and understanding of the tools and how you can apply them, and then elevate your lifestyle, in fact, elevate your life and your people's lives. Because instead of spending time on iterative processes and mundane iterations, you can actually spend more time with people, more time with customers, more time with staff, more time with peers in defining new ways of work and better ways of work.
No, spot on. I think there's two things there. One is that, and you mentioned about the customization of those ERP type systems. One of the reasons why businesses are successful is because they found a niche, which makes them unique. And that uniqueness means that your systems and processes and the technology you use to achieve those outcomes is going to also be certainly partly unique. Okay. So, there's no generalized system. You can have a generalized accounting system. And even if you look at accounting, it's what is GAP actually? A generally agreed accounting practice. It's not a rule. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think these things have to be, and so you will work your systems and customize accordingly. And those customizations are what costs the money at the end of the day. And eventually the system is so customized, it bears little resemblance to the original, draft, if you like. The other part of it is, to your point on AI, is that I think AI is fundamentally changing business. Okay.
Yeah.
And we are at the point now, as I said in the beginning, we're only at the start. And companies are looking for ways to bolt AI onto existing systems, processes, outcomes, whatever. And what actually AI requires is to start with AI in the middle and see
Yes.
how you can use AI to make a business, if you can put it that way. And that is a big leap, because it's fine if you are AI literate, let's put it that way, okay. But if you're not
Yes.
into it, or if your company is not into it, to convince people, say, okay, we're going to upend the entire system. What was a bolt-on before is now the system. It takes a huge leap.
No, exactly. Jono, your thoughts sitting on the outside there, listening to all this rambling?
Sure. Yeah, no, I think what's happening is that you have this new technology just being dropped. And I mean, I know one of the questions that were raised is why are people pushing this so hard? Is there an actual turnaround in profit that can be made by just simply throwing AI into the system and sort of seeing it as the next generation of tools that one can use in business? And I think, often what's envisioned for something like a piece of software, you'll find the users will turn it upside down and make something incredibly different out of it. And I don't think we've seen exactly that potential yet. And I think it'll be very interesting when somebody cracks the code on what AI actually does. And then, of course, all the restructuring that has to happen around it. What can you do away with? Whose jobs are really going to be taken away as a result of this new technology getting into the picture, so to speak. So that's my thoughts. Yeah.
I think that what you touched on an interesting point there. I think that what the world is trying to move towards, certainly the ethical world, is to a place of where jobs don't disappear, they morph into something different, and people are in and through it actually elevated. They actually move to a new place of engagement, and in that way, not only maintain their earning potential, but they also elevate their level of self-worth and self-dignity and sense of relevance, because nothing should just obliterate the human factor. I understand cost optimization and wanting to find quicker ways to do things at less cost, and that's fine. But then let's redirect all that intellectual institutional capital and institutional knowledge, no matter how sort of narrow or siloed, into usable, leverageable energy and capability. Why not?
Because I know what I'm doing with it at the moment is that I find that when I interact and engage and do generative AI, I often find that I'm moving to evaluate the outcome a lot more than I used to, say.
Yes.
Or you can't take it for granted.
Yeah.
So my perception of this and how it's going to grow is that you'll find that people will start to evaluate that outcome. In other words, I think it'll develop critical thinking skills because you cannot just take it for granted. And so you'll find that people then push it towards their hopefully human agenda. And this will sort of lead the way, I think. So I think what I'm driving at here is that the automation that one thinks it's going to bring might actually result in less automation in other spaces.
I think if you look at a typical project, what we've seen is that in the past, there's, let's say, 100% of project time given. What's happening in the past, you'd spend maybe 15% defining what the project should look like. About another, 80%, if you like, or no, 70 odd percent of doing the actual project, and then the remainder to evaluate the outcomes and analyze the outcomes. That whole model is inverted now.
Yes.
So you spend a lot more time saying, what is the actual outcome we desire, and how are we going to get there, and then the work gets done really quickly, and then the outcome is very, very. Then you've got to review the outcome and cross-test it and reevaluate it and rerun it, if you like, to get the result that you actually wanted. So it's like inverted the entire picture.
And I think, getting philosophical on this now, in that defining of outcomes, I think there should be a constant revisit to the why. Why do we do what we do? Why do we want that outcome? Why do we want this increased territory and increased revenue and increased footprint? I understand the natural intention of business growth is to do that and to have that, but you don't lose sight of the greater what is the world asking of us right now question, and lose sight of what's really important, which is the purpose of being and the purpose of contribution and value, and actually making the world a better place for our grandchildren.
No, and I think, Bryan, you've hit is very, very squarely on the head there, because I think this is where this whole, you see these huge numbers being played out in terms of company valuations and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And these like big goals. And you think, okay, guys, you're spending a heck of a lot of money on this. AI is doing these wonderful things, supposedly. Where is that money going? Is it just going to create a greater class divide? The rich the rich get richer and the poor get poorer.
Who can AI and who cannot?
Dystopia? Yeah. That's a huge problem. That's pitchfork territory, man.
Yeah, and what a question to leave the show on, because we've come to the end of the show. So listeners, go away and ponder that and think about it and your contribution to it.
Send your questions in. We will review.
Yeah. Mark Walker, thank you so much for coming on the show. So lovely to see you again.
Likewise,
and let's talk to each other offline again soon.
Absolutely.
Send my best to our mutual friend, Mike.
Will do. And thanks for that, guys.
Well, such a pleasure. Thank you, listeners. That was Mark Walker, AI specialist, amongst other things. John O'Shaw, my co-host, and myself, Bryan Hattingh, signing off, reminding you, if you're not with the ones you love the ones you're with, and take time to show and tell the ones you love just how much you do.